Hey guys, it's Crystal from Casual Confections and I'm here with a baking experiment for you. I'm sure you've tried a cookie recipe and it didn't quite turn out either the way you expected or the way you remembered. Well, today we're going to kind of play around with some different conditions to see how they can impact a cookie recipe. I'm going to use a very easy to access recipe on the back of the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip bag. A lot of stuff you probably already have at home or can get easily. I'm going to make 2 batches of cookies and split them each in half. That gives us 4 things to play with. One is going to be a control, and a control is going to be we're going to make the cookies exactly how they're meant to be. No changes to the recipe. The second, I'm going to switch out the baking soda for baking powder. The third, I'm leaving out any agent, baking powder or baking soda, so it's just going to be straight up flour. And the fourth, we're going to add a little too much sugar to the cookie, and we're going to see what happens. If you're going to look to do this to test out your own recipe, kind of troubleshoot it, go for it. This is also great to do with kids because you can divide up the dough. You can have them play and see if they mess up. It's not a problem. You can actually see what happens. You can also do this as a science experiment for class. Make sure you have your stuff properly labeled, like here. So I have one batch split out between the control, which means we're making the cookies as they're intended to be. So that's the baking soda and the flour. And the too much sugar batch, that's also the proper amount of baking soda and flour that we need. And the second batch is broken out between the baking powder with no baking soda and the one that is just flour, no baking soda, no baking powder. And make sure you can keep track of what you changed. The best part is about this experiment, you get to eat the results. Baking's fun, keep it messy. Taste it, it'll be great. All right, so what we're doing first is we're creaming butter and sugar and vanilla extract together. Creaming means that we're going to mix it for 3 to 5 minutes until that sugar is really into that butter. That's gonna help make our cookies be really tasty. Now I'm not gonna get too far into technique with this. We're gonna follow the recipe on the bag and then we're just gonna go into the experiment. We are creaming our butter and sugar and vanilla extract, making sure that all gets worked in. You're going to let that go for about 3 to 5 minutes. It's going to start looking very creamy and smooth. So we're going to do 3 tests today to see what the differences are. There is a multitude of ones that you can do on your own. You can throw all the ingredients together in one batch to see what happens when you mix them all at once, versus a batch where you follow the instructions and add them bit by bit. See how that changes the texture and how they bake up. You can also try adding nuts and other mix-ins and see how that changes with the amount of flour you have in. A lot of people do not notice on the back of the Nestle bag there is actually special instructions. If you leave out the nuts on the recipe, you need to add another teaspoon or 2 of flour. So it's really interesting to see how that makes the cookie spread out a little more, whether you use nuts or not. So that's an interesting one to check out. Another great one to do is to pop some dough in the fridge or freezer. Pop it in the fridge overnight, for example, let's say between 2 hours to overnight, and see how that bakes up compared to dough that you bake fresh from mixing. See how those change up. See how they bake up a little differently. So that's a temperature change that you can look into. Another one you can do again is the flour. You can add more flour, add too much flour, add not enough flour, and see how the flour impacts the cookies. Now I'm sure you've seen some memes online that kind of show this snapshot already, but try it for yourself. It doesn't even have to be a chocolate chip recipe. Try a recipe that you have that's easy to do. You can do sugar cookies, you can do shortbreads, and just make something fun and enjoy it. For all you know, you're gonna stumble on a new combination for your cookies that you love, that you didn't know you can get that texture out of. You can also use melted butter versus cold butter. You can use brown butter. Brown butter chocolate chip cookies sound delicious right now. All right, so we've already creamed the butter and sugar, added the eggs, we've got the vanilla extract in. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna follow the instructions and we're gonna slowly add in our flour after we separate this batch of dough out. So remember, I'm making 2 batches, each is split in half. All right, so here we're already noticing a difference between the doughs. So this is our baking powder mixture. You can tell that the dough is crummy. Okay, this is something you might see more in a snickerdoodle recipe that uses baking powder. It just breaks it up a bit more. Then, this is what our dough looks like with the just flour, no baking soda, no baking powder. Big difference. So we'll see what these look like when they bake up. Now we're gonna add in the chocolate chips. All right guys, so we've mixed our stuff. One big tidbit for this, if you're doing your experiment, make sure your labeling goes with you so you keep track. So I've moved them from my original bowls to mixing bowls, and that lets us get over to our cookie sheet. So I've got my control labeled, my baking powder instead of baking soda, my no baking soda, and too much sugar. So I'm going to do one of each cookie so we can see what this looks like and see what it turns out to be. Now, as you can see, I've used a cookie scoop. I use a 1.5 tablespoon size cookie scoop. I love using this for cookies. It gets them pretty close to uniform size, and it's a really good portion. Plus, it's really easy to double up if you're just really in the mood for a big cookie. All right, so let's pop these babies in the oven. We are going to do it at 375 per the instructions on the bag. All right, guys, cookies are in the oven, 375 for 9 to 11 minutes per the package. I'm starting them at 9 minutes, and I'll check them and see if we need to add any more time. Always start on the low end, because it's always easier to add time than it is to take away time. And it's really easy to forget. If you're like, oh, I'll set it for 11 minutes and I'll check it at 9 minutes. You're going to forget before that timer goes off. You're going to get distracted. It happens. Time flies. Set it for the lowest amount of time, especially if it's your first time going through or if it's a new oven or new tools or anything like that. Start at the lowest end and then add your increments slowly. So I'm going to check at 9 minutes, and if it needs more time, I'll probably do 1 to 2 minute increments from there, depending on how long I think they still need. And as you saw, I have my cookies on parchment paper on the cookie sheet. If you want to do another type of experiment, you can make 1 batch of cookies, as intended, as the instructions say, and you can test to see how they bake up on a greased cookie sheet, which means you've used non-stick baking spray or butter or margarine or something to grease the sheet before you put the cookies down. An ungreased cookie sheet, which means you haven't messed with it at all. Parchment paper, which I have used today, or a silicone mat, which I know a lot of people swear by. I took a batch of macarons last year and did 1/2 on a silicone mat and 1/2 on parchment paper. Completely different results. It was the same batch in the oven at the same time, same process. So check it out. And if you guys do any of these experiments, make sure you're making notes of what you're doing. Write it down, record it. Difference between messing around in science is recording your data. If you do try these out and want to let me know how they turned out, please send me your videos, especially if you're doing it with your kids. Baking with your kids can be a lot of fun. You do need patience, especially for some of those little guys who are just getting started. But yes, please send them casualconfections@gmail.com or Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or in the YouTube comments. Hit me up. I'd love to see what you guys are doing. All right, so we've got some time before these cookies are done, but with the magic of video, they'll be done like that. All right, guys, here's what our cookies look like after 9 minutes. So you see got some big differences in shape. Baking soda is spread out a bit. We got some burnt edges and some kind of undercooked the rest of the way. Our too much sugar is spread out. It actually looks like quite a tasty cookie. It'll probably be really tasty fresh, but these types of cookies, as they spread out like this, get hard pretty quick. So they probably going to be dipped in milk a lot sooner. All right, our baking powder instead of baking soda is still pretty underbaked. It's getting some brown at the bottom. At the top. Oh no, it's pretty well baked. It's just a very light dough. And our control, still with the rounded shape, browning all around. All in all, I say these all look like really tasty cookies. Yum. All right. Which one would you guys prefer? Well, all right, guys, that's our experiment. We did a control and 3 variations. We got some very interesting results. Of course, your results may differ from what you see here. It all depends on the process you used and what you did to put your cookies together. Even following the same recipe, conditions like the temperature in your house, whether it's humid outside or not, if you're at a higher elevation or a lower elevation, all of these things, including oven temperature, the way your oven works, what type of oven you have, the type of baking pan you have, everything will change how cookies will turn out or any baked good. So don't be upset. You're doing an experiment too. You're going to get results. See what those results are. If they're different from mine, check out how they're different. Why do you think they're different? If you really want to use this for a science experiment for school, for a science fair or something else, try looking into the chemistry about why some of these things happen. Why is it that baking powder causes the cookie to bake up so much differently than baking soda? Why are either baking soda or baking powder needed? There are a lot of interesting questions that we can ask that come out of baking. This is a great way to practice science without realizing you're doing science. So record those notes, enjoy those results. They're so tasty. And let me know what turned out. Send me a video, send me an email, let me know. All right, guys, stay cool, stay safe, mask up. See you at the next video.